OpenNMS 101 again. Module 6 continues with Part B using SNMP v3 and opening up object access. Adding SNMP v3 access to SNMP on the Linux server is straightforward. Stop the SNMP daemon, add the SNMP v3 user and required authentication parameters, start the SNMP daemon. This is all done without touching the SNMP v1 or v2 configurations. After adding the SNMP v3 credentials, compare the output of SNMP walk using v2 and v3. There is a script available to add an SNMP v3 user. It is net-snmp-create-v3-user, and this script was installed as part of the net-snmp package. The requirements are a username, an authentication password hashing algorithm, and an encryption password, an encryption algorithm, and arguments to indicate that the SNMP v3 user has read-only privileges. Begin by changing directories to /etc/snmp. Make a copy of snmp.conf. Now stop the SNMP daemon. Now execute the command net-snmp create v3 user, where -ro indicates that this is a read-only user. SNMP auth pass is the authentication password. SNMP priv pass is the encryption password. SHA is the authentication hashing algorithm. AES is the encryption algorithm. And SNMP admin is the username. The output indicates success and prints exactly what was added to snmp.conf. Restart the SNMP daemon. Differentiate between the new and older versions of snmp.conf by running a diff against the current and previous versions. Only the RO user SNMP admin line was added. SNMP v1 and v2c should be unaffected at this point. Run the standard snmp walk -v2c command. The result matches the runs in Part A of this module. Now run the snmp walk-v3 command as shown. The snmp walk v3 command breaks down as follows. -v3 indicates version 3. Uppercase A indicates that SNMP auth pass is the authentication password. Uppercase X SNMP priv pass is the privacy passphrase used for encryption. Lowercase a SHA inputs the authentication hashing algorithm. -X AES is the privacy protocol for encryption. Lowercase L auth priv indicates that authentication and privacy are being used. Lowercase u snmp admin is the snmp v3 username. Localhost is the server being interrogated. .1 is the starting point in the MIB architecture. This is ISO, where the interrogation begins. The result is far more extensive than version 2c. This is because the default view in SNMP is the full MIB. The number of lines returned from SNMP walk -v2c is 39. The number of lines returned from SNMP walk -v3 is 13,472. OpenNMS is not yet configured to access the SNMP agent on the local host using SNMP v3. It is still using SNMP v2 to retrieve information, and SNMP v2 provides limited data. Therefore, OpenNMS does not know something very important. There is another interface on the server besides the loopback or localhost interface. The localhost front page displays only one IP interface, 127.0.0.1. Using IPA from the command line shows two interfaces. The second interface is ENS160. Running SNMP walk using SNMP v3 and grepping for ifname produces two results, LO and ENS160. OpenNMS must use the SNMP v3 user to find out about the additional IP interface. To reconfigure OpenNMS to use SNMP v3, follow these steps. Remove SNMP v1 and v2c from the SNMP agent. The SNMP v1, v2c, and v3 agent all must be tested. Reconfigure OpenNMS to use SNMP v3. Rescan the local host and observe the results. Remove SNMP v1 and v2c from the agent by editing etc snmp snmp.d.conf. comment out the line that begins with com2sec. Save and close the file. Restart the SNMPD service. Test SNMP walk using SNMP v2c and SNMP v1. Both should fail with a timeout error. Test SNMP walk using SNMP v3. This should work as before. Return to the OpenNMS localhost front page. The SNMP service is still up. This is because the service has not been pulled since SNMP v2 was taken down on the server. Wait a bit of time and an SNMP outage will appear in the events list. To remedy this, go to Admin Configuration and click on Configure SNMP Community Names by IP address. Enter the IP address 127.0.0.1 and click on Lookup. This indicates that SNMP v2 is still being used to access SNMP on the local host. Change the version to version 3. Scroll down to the v3 specific parameters. The security name is SNMP admin. The security level is auth priv. The authentication password is SNMP auth pass. The authentication protocol is SHA. The privacy passphrase is SNMP priv pass. The privacy protocol is AES. The engine ID can be found through SNMP grep engine. The value is copied and pasted into the text box. Scroll down to the bottom and click on Save Config. The changes are immediately effective. Return to the OpenNMS localhost front page. The SNMP outage is still visible. Wait a bit, and polling with the new SNMP v3 access parameters should pick the SNMP service back up. The breadth of information available with SNMP v3 includes the additional IP interface. Rescan the local host. Wait for the scan to complete, and when it does, the second interface is listed. Note the interface 192.168.159.105 does not have an SNMP service. This is because OpenNMS has not been configured to access SNMP v3 on 192.168.159.105. To do this, return to the terminal and change to the /opt/OpenNMS/etc directory. Double-check the IP address. It should be 192.168.159.105. Highlight and copy the address. Rather than add the SNMP v3 parameters for 192.168.159.105 via the GUI, it is quicker to add 192.168.159.105 to the SNMP v3 parameters in snmp-config.xml. Then edit snmp-config.xml. Copy and paste the 127.0.0.1 line and replace 127.0.0.1 with 192.168.159.105. Save and close the file. Changes to snmp-config.xml are not immediate. To force OpenNMS to reread the snmp-config.xml file, execute send-event.pl configure SNMP. Return to the GUI and rescan the local host. When the scan completes, the SNMP service should be added to 192.168.159.105. To summarize, the local host's SNMP agent was configured to use SNMP v3 exclusively. OpenNMS was configured to use SNMP v3 to access the local host's SNMP agent. OpenNMS can configure SNMP access through the GUI or through a text file. Up next, Module 6 continues with Part C, collecting metrics using SNMP.